The officer's shot cracked across the parking lot like a warning shot, sharp enough to turn every head near the showroom doors. "Step away from the vehicle, now." His boots scraped against the asphalt as he closed in on the black man standing beside a midnight blue luxury sedan, a car polished so clean the clouds looked painted onto its hood. The CEO didn't flinch, didn't argue, just held the fob loosely at his side as if the situation bored him. But the officer's partner stepped forward with a hand hovering near his holster, eyes locked on the man as though he'd been caught mid-crime. You could feel the tension stretch tight, like the whole air was waiting to snap. "And just when the officer barked again, you really think you can steal a car like this and walk?" The CEO lifted his gaze, calm, unbothered, and that serenity only made the scene burn hotter. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now, back to Marcus. Officer Daly towered over him, chest puffed, knuckles white where his hand gripped the radio at his shoulder. His partner, Ortiz, circled the front of the car like he was examining evidence, even though there wasn't a scratch, not a sign of forced entry, nothing except one black man holding his own keys. "You fit the description," Daly said. Marcus didn't bother asking what description, he'd heard some version of that phrase since he was 16. Ortiz leaned into the driver's window and muttered, "No way he owns this. Not dressed like that." Marcus wore a charcoal hoodie, sleeves pushed to the elbows, plain black joggers, running shoes, comfortable, nothing loud, nothing flashy. He preferred it that way when he wasn't on a stage or in a boardroom. But men like Daly never saw simplicity, they saw threat. Daly snatched the key fob from Marcus's hand with a jerk sharp enough to draw murmurs from a couple standing near the entrance. A young dealership employee froze halfway through unlocking the showroom doors, recognition flickering in his eyes. He knew that face, had seen it on a corporate banner inside. But before he could speak, Daly barked at him, "Keep walking." Marcus kept his hands visible, palms relaxed at his sides. But inside his chest, something old stirred, a memory of a roadside stop in rural Georgia where he'd been shoved against a hood still hot from the sun, accused of stealing a truck his father had spent 10 years saving to buy. He felt that same heat now, low and rising. Ortiz clicked his tongue as he circled back. "This car is worth more than your apartment, man. Just tell us where you actually got it." Marcus breathed in once, slow, grounding himself like he'd learned to do in every unfair board negotiation, every coded comment, every moment he'd been told he was lucky to be in rooms he built with his own money. Daly stepped closer, shadow falling over him. "Hands behind your head." Phones lifted around them. A couple near the sidewalk hesitated, whispering. The dealership's security camera above the awning blinked red. Marcus looked at the officers, then at the fob now clenched in Daly's fist. "You're making a mistake," he said, not loud, not angry, just certain. Daly smirked. "The only mistake is thinking you can walk up and take a car like this. Not today." And for the first time, Marcus let a sliver of steel enter his voice. "Officer, that vehicle belongs to me." The words didn't calm the officers. They ignited them. Officer Daly tightened his grip on the key fob as if holding it could somehow rewrite reality, while Marcus stood centered in the parking lot, posture calm but eyes steady, the kind of calm that unsettles men who rely on chaos to feel in control. Part 2 begins in the same breath that Part 1 ended, the moment hanging like a drawn bow. A small cluster of bystanders edged closer, their steps slow, pulled in by the gravity of injustice unfolding in real time. A young dealership employee, the same one Daly had barked at earlier, hovered near the showroom doors. His name was Ethan, barely 22, still wearing a badge that read trainee sales associate, and his voice trembled when he finally gathered the courage to speak. "Officer, I think you have the wrong guy," he said, but the words barely made it past his lips before Ortiz shot him a glare sharp enough to shut a door. "Return inside. This is police business." Ethan hesitated, caught between conscience and authority, then stepped back but did not walk away. Daly turned to Marcus and lifted the fob to eye level, examining it like a counterfeit bill. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. Marcus answered with quiet precision. "It was issued to me when I purchased this vehicle. I can also prove ownership." Ortiz scoffed. That is funny. Everyone we catch stealing says something like that. Daly pivoted toward the sedan and pressed the unlock button. The headlights flashed, the mirrors folded out, and the engine gave a soft mechanical hum as though greeting its rightful owner, but Daly twisted the moment into suspicion. Remote hacking. Seen it before. The accusation drifted across the asphalt, absurd and heavy, drawing a few scoffs from witnesses who could not believe what they were hearing. A middle-aged woman clutching a shopping bag muttered, "This is ridiculous," while a man near her pulled out his phone to record, stating under his breath, "They are really doing this." Marcus remained still, hands visible, breathing measured. The memory of that Georgia roadside flickered again, but this time it was not defeat that rose in him. It was clarity. "Officer," Marcus said slowly, "you are escalating a situation that does not require escalation. If you run the plates, you will get the answer you are refusing to see." Daly ignored him and leaned toward Ortiz. "Call it in as potential grand theft auto." Ortiz nodded and reached for his radio. Ethan blurted out, louder this time, adrenaline overtaking fear. "He is the owner. I know who he is. His picture is inside the dealership. He is one of the corporate executives." Daly snapped, "Son, if you say one more word, I will charge you with obstruction." Ethan swallowed, but he did not step back this time. "I am telling the truth." The tension shifted, small but noticeable. A couple of bystanders murmured agreement. Someone else said, "Maybe listen to him." Ortiz pressed the radio button anyway. "Dispatch, we have a suspect attempting to steal a high-value vehicle." Marcus's jaw tightened at the word suspect. He reached calmly into his pocket. Daly's hand flew to his holster. "Hands where I can see them." Marcus lifted both palms slowly. "I am taking out my phone," he said clearly. "I am calling my executive assistant. She will confirm everything." Daly laughed through his nose. "Sure. Go ahead. Call your assistant." Marcus dialed. The ring clicked once before a composed voice answered. "This is Rachel. Are you ready for activation, sir?" Marcus looked directly at Daly as he spoke. "Rachel, start protocol Blackline. They have escalated." A hush fell over the witnesses. Even the wind seemed to pause. Ortiz lowered his radio slightly. Daly frowned, uncertain for the first time. And then Rachel's voice came through with surgical clarity. "Protocol Blackline is live. The system is pulling registration, corporate ownership logs, and network access data. All departments are receiving the alert." Marcus did not smile. He did not need to. The power shift had already begun. The moment Rachel confirmed Protocol Blackline was active, a subtle shift rippled through the parking lot, as if the asphalt itself had inhaled. Officer Daly did not understand the significance, but he felt it. His fingers tightened around the key fob, knuckles whitening, while Ortiz lowered his radio completely, uncertainty flickering across his face. Several bystanders leaned forward, drawn deeper into the unfolding tension. Marcus remained still, phone lowered but not pocketed, his breath even and steady, the kind of composure that made men like Daly feel as though the ground beneath them might give way. Rachel's voice came through again, crisp and unmistakable. "Sir, internal registration logs have been transmitted to the city's law enforcement network. Any officer within jurisdiction will receive the alert." Daly forced a laugh, but it sounded strained. "Nice trick. Trying to intimidate us with big words and fake systems." Ethan stepped forward another half step, his voice more confident now. "Officer, please. His name is Marcus Carter. He is not just some executive. He is the owner. He bought this dealership's parent company last year." Ortiz turned sharply toward Ethan. "The owner of the company drives around in sweatpants?" Ethan replied, "He does when he wants to test how customers and staff are treated. He is known for it." Several witnesses murmured in agreement. A man in a baseball cap said, "I have seen CEOs do that. Undercover visits and all." A woman near him added, "He told you he owns the car." Just run the plates. Daly ignored them and stepped closer to Marcus. You think because you can afford a nice phone and know how to say protocol, I am going to believe you? Marcus lifted his gaze, meeting the officer's stare with a calm that cut deeper than anger ever could. It does not matter whether you believe me. The truth is already moving. At that exact moment, a chime echoed from Daly's patrol car, a digital alert flashing across the onboard computer. Ortiz glanced back at the sound. What was that? Daly barked, ignore it, but the chime sounded again, louder this time, followed by a synthetic female voice coming from the open passenger door. Attention! Corporate ownership verification in progress. Registered owner, Marcus Elijah Carter. The bystanders reacted instantly with audible shock. Phones rose higher. Someone whispered, "No way. He really is the owner." Ethan exhaled in relief, saying softly, "Finally." Daly's face hardened, denial wrestling with reality. The system must be compromised, he insisted, but even he did not seem convinced. Ortiz stepped toward the patrol car, eyes scanning the screen. Daly, the alert says the system is authenticated. It is coming from headquarters. Another chirp cut through the air, this one from Daly's radio. A dispatcher's voice crackled through. Unit 12, be advised, Corporate Representative Marcus Carter is present at your location. Confirm safety. Do not detain. I repeat, do not detain. The witnesses gasped. Daly's jaw clenched so tight the muscle in his cheek twitched. He tried to speak, but no words came. Marcus finally broke the silence, his tone level and unshakable. You forced this escalation. I asked you to check before assuming, but you chose the assumption that fit your bias. Ortiz swallowed hard and looked at Daly, searching for direction that no longer existed. For the first time, the power dynamic in the parking lot shifted entirely. Marcus did not move, did not raise his voice, did not threaten. He simply stood there as the system he built began to expose every lie spoken against him. And the crowd watched in a silence that felt like judgment. For a long second, Officer Daly did not move. The patrol car's scanner continued to glow with the confirmation of Marcus Elijah Carter's identity, the robotic voice repeating its verification as if the machine itself refused to let the moment slip away or be twisted into anything other than absolute truth. Ortiz stepped back, his posture deflating as the enormity of what they had done settled in his chest. The crowd, now larger and brimming with tension, watched with a mixture of outrage and awe. Ethan hovered near the edge of the gathering, eyes fixed on Daly with a kind of cautious hope. The hope that a man confronted with undeniable evidence would choose integrity. But Daly's pride did not allow that. He threw the access card onto the hood of the patrol car as if it burned him. This does not prove you did not steal the car, he muttered, the words trembling with desperation rather than authority. Marcus did not react. He had lived long enough to recognize that some men would sooner break the world around them than admit they were wrong. A woman in the crowd raised her voice, sharp with disbelief. He has a card that overrides your system. What more do you want? Another added, just say you made a mistake. The chorus of frustration grew louder. A man wearing a delivery uniform stepped forward, pointing toward the patrol car. The system verified his name, his title, his ownership, everything. You cannot keep pretending it is not real. Ortiz ran a hand over his face, his breathing unsteady. Daly, we need to step back. We need to de-escalate. But Daly shook his head and snapped, no. Something is off. People like him do not get to walk around acting untouchable. The words hit the air with the force of a slap. Several witnesses gasped. Ethan whispered, you cannot say that, but Daly was too far down the path of misplaced certainty to stop himself. He stepped toward Marcus again, jabbing a finger at him. You think your money makes you above suspicion? You think having a shiny car makes you special? No. I know your type. Marcus looked directly into his eyes, voice quiet but cutting. What type is that, officer? Daly's jaw clenched, the answer caught somewhere between prejudice and fear. Before he could speak, Rachel's voice broke through Marcus's phone speaker again, this time louder, more urgent. Sir, the Regional Law Enforcement Command Center has received the black line alert. The police chief has been notified. He is en route to your location. The parking lot seemed to exhale all at once. Ortiz stepped away from Daly as if the announcement had physically moved him. The police chief is coming here, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus responded without looking away from Daly. Protocol blackline escalates automatically when a corporate executive is detained without cause. Your department uses our security interface. The chief knows what that means. Ethan blinked in astonishment. Several bystanders exchanged stunned glances. A teenager recording on her phone whispered, he called the police chief without even calling the police chief. Daly's face twisted in panic. His voice cracked as he snapped, You called him? You went above us? Marcus replied with measured emphasis. You made the choice to escalate. I made the choice to protect myself. Daly looked around frantically, as if searching for an escape route from the situation he had built with his own arrogance. But there was none. Every witness had their phone out. Every second was being recorded. Every lie he had told was unraveling. And in that moment, as the distant wail of an approaching siren floated through the air, everyone understood that the next few minutes would decide the fate of more than a stolen car accusation. They would decide the fate of a man who believed that power was his by default, only to discover what real power looked like when used with precision instead of rage. The rising siren grew louder, weaving through the tension that had settled over the parking lot like a storm cloud that refused to move. Officer Daly heard it and stiffened, his jaw locking as the reality of what was coming crashed against his denial. Ortiz took an instinctive step back, as if distance alone could protect him from the consequences that were approaching with every passing second. Marcus stood exactly where he had before, posture steady, expression unchanged, as though he had known this moment was inevitable from the second Daly laid hands on his key fob. The crowd sensed the shift immediately. Phones rose higher. Conversations dropped to whispers. A man at the edge of the gathering murmured, The police chief does not show up unless something serious is happening. A woman beside him replied, Something serious did happen. They profiled the owner of the company. Ethan stood frozen, torn between fear for his job and the heavy relief that truth was finally forcing its way into the open. He whispered to Marcus, Sir, I am sorry. I should have pushed back sooner. Marcus only replied, You spoke when it mattered. The siren cut off abruptly, and moments later, a black unmarked SUV turned into the dealership lot. It rolled to a stop with slow, deliberate precision. The door opened, and Police Chief Raymond Holt stepped out, his uniform immaculate, his expression carved from stone. He was not a man who wasted time or words, and every person in the crowd felt the weight of his presence instantly. Daly straightened, trying to mask the panic rising behind his eyes. Ortiz looked down, unable to meet the chief's gaze. Chief Holt surveyed the scene, taking in the patrol car, the crowd, the phones, the tension, the fear, and finally Marcus, who stood in the center of it all with the quiet authority of someone who had endured this pattern for far too long. Who initiated the detainment? Chief Holt asked, his voice even but carrying an unmistakable edge. Daly stepped forward, forcing confidence into his tone. I did, sir. The suspect was attempting to steal a high-value vehicle. Suspect, Holt repeated slowly. Is that so? He turned to Marcus. Sir, are you the individual identified in the black line alert? I am, Marcus answered calmly. Holt nodded once, then faced Daly with the kind of stare that made rookies sweat during their first evaluation. Officer Daly, did you run the registration when Mr. Carter identified himself as the owner? Daly cleared his throat. Not immediately, sir. His behavior was suspicious and did you check his identification? He refused to provide any, Daly lied. The crowd erupted with immediate protest, voices layered with disbelief. He never refused, someone shouted. You never asked, another yelled. Ethan stepped forward, hands trembling. Chief, that is not true. Mr. Carter offered to show identification, but Officer Daly dismissed it and said people like him always lie. The parking lot went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Chief Holt turned slowly back toward Daly, whose face drained of color. "Is that accurate?" Holt asked, voice low. Daly stammered, I may have said something that was misinterpreted." Marcus spoke then, not with anger but with clarity sharpened over years of experience. "Officer Daly assumed ownership was impossible for someone who looks like me. Every decision he made afterward was built on that assumption." Holt studied Marcus, then the access card on the hood of the patrol car, then the patrol car's screen still displaying the authentication alert. His voice, when he spoke, carried the full authority of his position. "Mr. Carter, on behalf of this department, I apologize for what you have been subjected to." Daly whispered, "Chief, please," but Holt did not look at him. Not yet. Everyone could feel the balance shifting, the collapse beginning, the moment when prejudice met consequence. And it was far from over. Chief Holt stood completely still, letting the weight of his apology linger in the air, and every person watching could feel that something significant was about to break open. The tension was no longer just between Marcus and Officer Daly, it had expanded, stretching across the entire parking lot like a net of accountability. Ethan kept his eyes on the chief, his breath caught somewhere between fear and relief. Daly, on the other hand, seemed to shrink inside his own uniform, the authority he had flaunted minutes earlier slipping through his fingers like sand he could not clutch tightly enough. Chief Holt finally turned to him, his voice steady, sharp, and colder than the wind moving across the asphalt. "Officer Daly, step forward." Daly obeyed, but his movements were stiff, jerking slightly as though his own legs no longer trusted him. Holt continued, "Before I proceed, I want to hear, in your own words, the reason you believed Mr. Carter posed a threat or suspicion." Daly swallowed hard. "Sir, he was standing next to a luxury vehicle, dressed in a way that did not match the profile of someone who would own it. And he acted, too calm. Car thieves often do that to avoid detection." Several members of the crowd groaned. A man muttered, "Calm is suspicious now?" A woman added, "Calm is what kept you from hurting him." Marcus watched Daly with the unblinking clarity of someone who had lived through this type of judgment more times than anyone in that parking lot would ever know. Chief Holt's jaw tightened. "So, to be clear, you based your suspicion primarily on his appearance and demeanor?" Daly hesitated, then forced the word out. "Yes." The crowd reacted immediately. Disbelief. Anger. Shaking heads. Holt raised a hand, and silence returned as quickly as it had vanished. "Officer Ortiz," Holt said, shifting his attention, "did you at any point attempt to counter Officer Daly's assumption or ensure proper protocol was followed?" Ortiz's shoulders slumped. "No, sir. I should have. But I did not." Holt pressed, "Why?" Ortiz looked at Marcus, then at the crowd. "Because I trusted Daly's judgment. And because it is easier not to question a partner." Holt's eyes darkened with disappointment. Easier does not mean lawful. And it certainly does not mean ethical. At that moment, a memory surfaced in Marcus's mind, unbidden but vivid. He was 24, walking through a high-rise lobby with a portfolio under his arm, preparing for a pitch that would eventually launch his first investment round. A security guard had blocked him at the elevator, stating flatly, "Deliveries go through the back entrance." Marcus had been in a suit. A tailored one. But it had not mattered. That same weight pressed against him now, but this time, he did not stand alone. The crowd waited for his response, for something powerful, for the kind of truth that cut deeper than any accusation. Marcus lifted his head, speaking not just to Daly but to the entire gathering. "This is not the first time someone looked at me and decided I could not own what I worked for. It has happened in hotel lobbies, in airports, in offices I built from the ground up. And today, it happened again. What made it different today was not your system or your badge. It was your expectation that someone who looks like me could only be a thief standing next to success." The words hit the air with undeniable force. Even Chief Holt seemed to absorb them, as if measuring each syllable carefully. Daly's mouth tightened, his pride wrestling with the truth he did not want to face. Marcus continued, "You talk about suspicious behavior. My calm made you angry because you expected fear. You expected panic. You expected guilt. You did not expect confidence." There were murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Ethan whispered, "This is what leadership sounds like." Chief Holt turned his full attention to Daly again, his voice quieter but far more dangerous. "Officer Daly, you have not only violated protocol but demonstrated a level of bias that is incompatible with this department." Daly's eyes widened. "Chief, please," but Holt cut him off with a single word delivered like a verdict. "Enough." The collapse had begun, and Daly knew it. Everyone knew it. And Marcus, still composed, still steady, did not look away. The moment Chief Holt silenced Officer Daly, the air in the dealership lot shifted again, tighter, pulsing with the unmistakable sense that something irreversible was about to unfold. The crowd leaned in, phones raised, breaths held. Daly stood rigid, eyes darting between Marcus, the chief, and the patrol car screen that still displayed Marcus Elijah Carter's identity like a mirror he could not escape. Holt stepped forward, his presence commanding even in silence, then spoke with a precision that cut through the tension. "Officer Daly, your actions today demonstrate a pattern of misconduct that this department cannot and will not tolerate. You disregarded protocol, ignored available evidence, escalated an encounter without cause, and engaged in biased assumptions unbecoming of an officer entrusted with public safety." Every word hit like a gavel. Daly swallowed, the muscles in his throat tightening. "Chief, I made a mistake, but I did not." Holt raised a hand. "Do not speak unless I ask you a direct question." The crowd reacted quietly. Someone whispered, "He is done." Another murmured, "That is what accountability sounds like." Ortiz stood to the side, his expression heavy with regret, but even he knew the spotlight had moved past him. Daly, however, seemed to cling to the scraps of authority he thought he still held. "Chief Holt, with respect, I acted in the interest of protecting property and preventing a potential crime. Anyone in my position would have." Marcus's voice cut in softly, but its impact was stronger than any shout. "No. Not anyone. You looked at me and decided who I was before you asked a single question." Holt turned to Marcus. "Mr. Carter, I assure you this department will conduct a full investigation." Marcus replied, "What happened here was not a misunderstanding. It was a choice." Those words echoed across the asphalt. A woman recording whispered, "He is right." Ethan nodded, fists clenched at his sides. "He is absolutely right." Holt faced Daly again, this time removing his own badge from his chest pocket and holding it for a moment as if measuring the weight of it. "Officer Daly, your badge represents integrity, accountability, and service to the citizens of this city. Today, you upheld none of those values. Therefore, effective immediately, you are relieved of duty pending formal termination proceedings." The crowd gasped, a mix of shock and vindication swirling like electricity through the air. Daly's face drained of color. "Chief, you cannot do this. You cannot end my career over one incident." Holt's gaze was unmovable. "One incident can reveal everything a person tries to hide." Daly stepped back, as if the words had physically struck him. "You are ruining my life over him?" Marcus met his eyes with unshaken calm. "You ruined your career the moment you decided my skin color was evidence." Ortiz flinched. A man in the crowd whispered, "That is going to follow him forever." Holt extended his hand. His voice carried the weight of a final judgment. "Your badge. Now." For a moment, Daly did not move, his jaw trembling as he clung to the last thread of a power that had already slipped beyond reach. But the silence around him was absolute. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached up and unpinned the badge from his chest. He stared at it as if he no longer recognized what it was supposed to stand for, then placed it into Chief Holt's open palm, the metallic click of metal meeting skin ringing louder than the siren that had brought the chief there in the first place. The collapse was complete, the uniform no longer protected him. And every witness recorded the moment a man who believed he owned authority learned that he never understood it at all. For a moment after Officer Daly surrendered his badge, the parking lot fell into a stillness so complete that even the faint hum of traffic from the street seemed distant, muffled, as if the world outside understood it was witnessing something that demanded silence. The crowd stood rooted in place, every phone still raised, every gaze locked on the man who had just learned in real time that authority without integrity collapses under its own weight. Marcus did not gloat, did not smirk, did not shift even a fraction. He remained steady, a quiet pillar in the center of a storm he did not ask for but had learned long ago how to weather. Chief Holt closed his hand around the badge, the metal clicking against his palm like a judgment sealed, then turned toward Marcus with a gravity that matched the moment. "Mr. Carter," he said, "your composure today prevented this from becoming something far worse." Marcus answered with a tone that was firm but not harsh. "Composure should not be required for my safety." A ripple of agreement moved through the witnesses. A woman near the front whispered, that part, her voice thick with emotion. Holt nodded. "You are correct." He looked around at the officers, the bystanders, the dealership employees peering through the glass doors. "What happened here will not be buried. Not under paperwork, not under excuses, not under denial." Daly stood a few feet away, stripped of authority but not yet stripped of anger. His breaths were sharp, disjointed, as if he could not make sense of the humiliation closing in around him. "You ruined everything," he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for the tension to stiffen again. Marcus turned to him with a calm that cut deeper than shouting ever could. "No. You revealed everything." Daly shook his head. "You think you won something today?" There was no venom left in his voice, only disbelief that the man he targeted had stood taller with every attempt to tear him down. Marcus replied, "I did not come here to win. I came here to pick up my car." Chief Holt faced Daly again. "You will remove yourself from this lot immediately while we file the necessary documentation. Any further attempts to confront Mr. Carter or interfere with this investigation will be treated as obstruction." Daly opened his mouth as if to argue, but one look at the cameras, the crowd, the chief's unmovable expression, and the undeniable evidence flashing on the patrol car screen silenced him. He took a step back, then another, retreating toward the edge of the lot like a man walking out of the only world he believed he controlled. Ethan stepped closer to Marcus, his voice careful but sincere. "Sir, I know this should not have happened, and I am sorry for every second of it." Marcus nodded. "Accountability starts with truth. You told the truth." Ethan's shoulders eased, relief softening his posture. The other bystanders slowly lowered their phones, though no one stepped away yet. They were still anchored to the gravity of what had occurred, unwilling to break the spell of witnessing justice delivered without rage, without violence, without even a raised voice. Chief Holt cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, is there anything you need from this department at this moment?" Marcus took a breath, his gaze sweeping over the officers, the trembling remnants of Daly's authority, and the crowd that had chosen to stand with him. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years spent mastering the art of dignity in the face of prejudice. "Only one thing," he said. "Make sure this is not forgotten." The words settled heavily over the parking lot, not as a request but as a command, a vow, a line. Drawn cleanly between the past and whatever came next. And everyone present understood that they had witnessed more than an incident, they had witnessed a shift, a reckoning, a truth made visible in broad daylight. Chief Holt's acknowledgement of Marcus's words cast a solemn quiet across the parking lot, a quiet that did not feel empty but charged, as if every person present understood they were standing inside a moment that would play in their minds long after they went home. The dealership doors slid open and closed behind anxious employees peering out, unsure if they should remain inside or join the growing crowd. Marcus stood centered, the afternoon sun glinting off the hood of his car, the same car that had sparked an accusation but now stood as proof of every truth Daly tried to deny. Holt turned back toward the patrol car and issued orders into his radio with firm precision, his directives clipped and unmistakable. "Dispatch, open a formal misconduct file on Officer Daly. Begin immediate suspension protocols and flag the incident for external review." The tone alone said there would be no sweeping this under any rug. Daly's face twisted, bitterness pulling his features tight, but he no longer had the authority to speak. He knew it, everyone knew it. Ortiz took a step toward Marcus, his voice subdued and roughened by remorse. Mr. Carter. I should have questioned him. I should have asked for proof instead of assuming. Marcus regarded him steadily. It is not about one question. It is about the cost of not asking. Ortiz lowered his gaze, throat tightening as he nodded. A murmur spread through the crowd. A man wearing a backpack spoke just loudly enough to be heard. This is why people record everything. A woman next to him added, because if he did not stay calm, they would have written a different story. Another voice chimed in, calm saved his life. It should not have to. Marcus heard every word, felt every truth wrapped in those murmurs, but he remained focused, steady. Holt approached him, posture respectful yet authoritative. Mr. Carter, we have secured the incident, and an internal affairs team will be dispatched. There will also be an external civilian oversight unit assigned due to the activation of Protocol Blackline. Marcus gave a small nod. Good. Holt continued, however, given the escalation, I need to ask if you require medical attention or wish to file any immediate charges. Marcus paused, not because he was uncertain, but because he knew the weight of choosing his response carefully. No medical attention, he said, but yes, I will be filing charges. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Daly flinched as though the words struck him physically. You cannot do this, he muttered, but it no longer mattered. He had lost the right to shape the narrative. Ethan stepped closer, voice tentative but earnest. Mr. Carter, if you need any statement from me, I will provide it. I saw everything. Marcus placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, a brief but grounding gesture. Your voice will matter. The crowd murmured approval, the energy shifting from outrage to something steadier, something like resolve. Chief Holt cleared his throat again. We will escort Officer Daly from the premises. Once he is removed, you are free to retrieve your vehicle. Marcus glanced at his car, its glossy panels reflecting the faces of the people who had witnessed every moment. I will retrieve it, he said, but not until he is gone. Holt nodded and turned toward Daly. You heard him. Leave now. Daly hesitated, then walked away with slow, painful steps, the absence of a badge on his chest more visible than the badge had ever been. And as he left, a collective understanding settled over the crowd, this was more than punishment. This was a reckoning carved into broad daylight, witnessed by all, undeniable and unforgettable. The moment Officer Daly disappeared beyond the edge of the lot, escorted by two silent officers whose faces revealed more disappointment than hostility, the atmosphere shifted again, loosening but not softening. The crowd did not disperse, instead, they lingered with a sense of collective responsibility, as if leaving too soon would somehow cheapen what they had just witnessed. Marcus stood still for a long moment, his gaze following the path Daly had taken, not out of spite but out of contemplation, as though marking the exact line where unchecked authority had finally met consequence. Chief Holt approached again, his voice steady yet touched by something more human now. Mr. Carter, the scene has been fully secured. You may retrieve your vehicle whenever you are ready. Marcus nodded, but he did not move toward the car immediately. Instead, he looked around at the faces watching him. Some angry, some shaken, some simply processing the reality that dignity had been forced to prove itself in a parking lot under the sun. Ethan stepped closer, clutching his dealership badge nervously. Sir, if you want me to walk you in or help get your paperwork, I am here. I want to assist in any way I can. Marcus offered him a small, steady look, the kind that acknowledged courage rather than compliance. Thank you, Ethan. You did the right thing when it was hardest. Ethan exhaled, almost shaking with the relief of being seen in a way he had not expected. Behind them, a woman who had recorded the entire incident wiped a tear from her cheek. This should never be normal, she murmured, and a man beside her replied, maybe today makes it a little less normal. Holt directed the remaining officers to begin clearing pathways for documentation, then turned back to Marcus with a more personal tone. What Daly said, what he implied, it was unacceptable. I want you to know I do not take this lightly. Marcus's voice remained composed, but there was a gravity beneath it, unmistakable and unshakable. Chief, what happened today was not about one officer. It was about a pattern. A pattern people like me know far too well. Holt nodded, the weight of the truth settling on him. You are right. And I intend to address that pattern, not just the incident. Marcus looked at him for a beat longer, studying whether the promise was genuine. Holt held his gaze without flinching. Satisfied, Marcus finally turned toward his car, taking the first steps he had attempted to take long before the confrontation began. The crowd parted respectfully, creating a path without being asked. A man in a baseball cap called out, "Mr. Carter, thank you for standing your ground." A woman added, "Thank you for staying calm. You should not have had to, but thank you." Marcus placed his hand on the car door handle, but before opening it, he looked back at the crowd. For the first time since the encounter began, his expression softened just slightly, touched by something between gratitude and resilience. "I stayed calm," he said, "because losing my voice has never protected me. But raising it has never been necessary for the truth to be heard." The words hung suspended in the warm air, settling into every witness, every recording, every memory of the moment. Holt stood behind him, absorbing the statement with the solemn acknowledgement of a man who understood its depth only now. Ethan whispered, "That is going to be quoted everywhere." Marcus opened the car door slowly, as if reclaiming not just a vehicle but the space he had been denied access to by assumption and prejudice. And as he settled into the driver's seat, the crowd waited, not for another confrontation, not for another collapse of authority, but for the final affirmation they felt certain he would give. They were right. Marcus sat in the driver's seat for a brief moment without starting the engine, letting the weight of the afternoon settle around him like dust finally falling after a chaotic storm. The leather was still warm from the sun, carrying the familiar scent of his own car, the car he had worked for, earned, chosen, and yet somehow had to defend ownership of in front of strangers. Through the windshield, he could see the crowd still gathered, people who had paused their day to witness not just an incident, but a truth laid bare in real time. Chief Holt remained a few steps away, posture straight, hands clasped behind his back, waiting not out of authority but out of respect. Ethan stood near the front, his dealership badge slightly crooked, his face tense with the lingering adrenaline of everything he had just seen. The others waited too, recording, watching, absorbing, as though needing closure to a moment that had cracked something open in all of them. Marcus stepped out of the car and closed the door gently, the soft thud carrying farther than it should have. He walked toward the crowd, each step steady and unhurried. When he reached a spot where everyone could see him clearly, he drew a breath that seemed to quiet even the distant traffic. "I want to say something before I leave," he began, his voice low but resonant enough to command the space. Every phone rose again. Every conversation stopped. What happened here today is something many of us know too well. Suspicion without reason. Judgment without cause. Power without restraint. The crowd listened, some nodding, some tightening their grip on their phones, some holding back emotion they did not expect to feel in a dealership parking lot. "I stayed calm," Marcus continued, "not because calm is easy, but because calm is the only thing that has kept me safe in moments like these." A woman near the front, her eyes still red from earlier, whispered, "Lord, that part," under her breath. Marcus went on. "But understand something. I should not have to earn respect to avoid danger. I should not have to present credentials to prove my humanity. And I should not have to prove ownership to justify my presence beside something I bought with my own work." His words fell heavy, carried by truth rather than volume. Chief Holt stepped a little closer, removing his hat in a gesture of acknowledgement. Marcus looked at him directly. "Chief Holt, I appreciate your intervention. But what matters now is not one officer losing his badge. What matters is whether this moment changes anything beyond today." Holt nodded solemnly. "It will, Mr. Carter. I intend to make sure of it." Marcus held his gaze for another long second, then turned back to the crowd. "To all of you who watched, who recorded, who spoke up, understand that silence is the soil where injustice grows. Today, you chose not to be silent." Ethan swallowed hard, his voice catching as he managed, "We just did what was right, sir." Marcus nodded. Doing what is right is how change begins. The sun had shifted lower, casting long shadows across the asphalt like lines dividing what had been from what could be. Marcus took a step back toward his car, then paused, delivering the final words that would not just end the moment but define it. I did not raise my voice today. I raised the standard. The crowd reacted not with cheers but with something deeper, a collective exhale, a recognition, a shared understanding of the gravity of what they had witnessed. Chief Holt bowed his head slightly. Ethan looked both shaken and inspired. And Marcus, having said what needed to be said, returned to his car, opened the door, and slid inside. When the engine hummed to life, it sounded less like a departure and more like a continuation, a statement in motion. He drove away slowly, the crowd parting like a pathway being cleared, not out of fear but out of respect. And long after the car disappeared from view, the parking lot remained still, as if everyone sensed that something in them had shifted forever, carried forward by one man's refusal to let prejudice tell his story for him.